Hello, my name is Adam Bean and welcome to the 78th edition of Airhacks TV. And today with good topics. Actually, the topics are getting better and better, so I wouldn't be surprised in one point of time we'll get to 800th edition of Airhacks TV. So the very first, Java on Raspberry Pi. So I was approached by Frank Del Porta, and he asked me, about an interview about Raspberry Pi on Java and his book. So what we did, it was lots of fun. So you will, the interview is already published at Airhacks FM. And what he did, he describes actually how to run Java on Raspberry Pi. And what he also did, he created a Spring Boot example. And I asked, okay, so I have no idea about Spring Boot, but if you would just convert the application to Quarkus, then we can talk about that because I have some Quarkus experience and what he did. And the interesting part is that the Quarkus booted a little bit faster, not a little bit faster, so twice as fast. And what I wanted to share with you is the reaction. So on Twitter, this was what Frank said is okay, and now he compared the startup speed of Spring Boot and Quarkus and found out that the Quarkus is really fast in JVM mode. So Frank didn't test the native mode, just the JVM mode. And Dominic said, okay, honestly, who cares about shaving off a few seconds of startup time in exchange for lower quality documentation, features, and maintenance? And then I asked Frank, because Frank has no idea about microprofile, no idea about Jakarta or Quarkus, and he said it's actually the documentation was pretty decent, and he managed to implement the application or migrate the application in a few hours, I think. So you can listen to the podcast. And on the blog, he posted the results. So if you're curious, take a look on this, because I think this is Raspberry Pi is an ARM-based, not server. In his case, a server, but this is a PC. Yeah, we can say PC. So an ARM seems to be more or less a future. So lots of clouds are already based on ARM. So this could be an interesting case. And what he did, there should be where should be the startup times, hopefully here. As you can see, the Spring jar and Quarkus jar, it is like the on PC Quarkus is 2 seconds, Spring jar is 7, it's a little bit long, but on the Pi 4, Spring boots in 34 seconds and Quarkus on 9 seconds is actually more than twice as fast. So, but interesting case. And if you like, help Frank to test Helidon, because I asked, what about Helidon? It would be also interesting to see how fast Helidon actually boots in JVM mode. Okay, so we covered that. So I really enjoyed the interview. It was also about film school, so interesting. Okay, so we had that. The next one is, the third one, before I forget. So the airhacks.com are not around the corner. In contrary, they are scheduled for December. And what I did is, I will just go to workshops@adambean.com because it's more visible. So what I did, I converted them into virtual online live workshops. So what this means is, unfortunately, if you registered to Airport Munich, there were already a lot of registrations. There will be no Airport Munich in 2020. You will have to attend online. But if you like to attend online, you have 2 more options. So there's the regular training, architecting and designing microprofile and Jakarta applications. And we will also talk about not only this, but also event streams and clouds and Kafkas or whatever. But the focus is microprofile and Jakarta, as we did at Airport Munich. And the microprofile with Quarkus and micro frontends with web components, lit HTML and Redux is going to be a virtual online session. So if you like, feel free to register, but there's plenty of time. So I will, in one point of time, offer the same registration as Airhacks Live. Now it's a little bit more confusing. This comes with the Airhacks Live logo, and the other thing comes with the regular, airhacks.com look and feel. But yeah, what we can do, And I'm not sure when we start with the workshops in 2021. My idea is I will restart or reboot the Airport Munich workshops in case I know the pandemic is 100% solved. So I don't think there is any benefit of exposing the attendees to risk. And the online workshops are even cheaper, so you can even save some money. So perfect. And I've some time traveling. So the next thing. So we covered the promotional stuff. Thoughts on Quarkus Hackathlon. So what? Wait a second. The Brett Tucker. Brett says the new AirHacks logo will need a mask somewhere. Yeah, Brett Tucker is a friend of the show. He attended the live and the workshops at Munich Airport, and I thought about the IRC already. So I thought whether we should convert to, for instance, Gitter or Slack, but I think it's a little bit cumbersome or whatever, because or we could use the AirHacks TV chat or just Twitter. So because it's not widely used, this IRC, just the Brett Tucker is the power IRC user, and just because of him, I'm maintaining my textual or IRC account here. Okay, so Quarkus Hackathlon. So I was one of the judges, and wait a second, I will just close this tab. And where is it? So we can also skip the podcast. And no, the OID is private. And then Quarkus dev post. Exactly. This is what I wanted to see. And there's view the winners. So I was one of the judges, and I thought, okay, how to judge a project, because I wanted to be fair. And what this hackathon was, this was you could submit a project, and there was a chance to win something or money. And the problem was, they got way too many submissions. So yeah, there were lots of submissions, like 30 of them, and what I did, I performed a code review, and you can watch the results live. So there is the hackathon video I also have on my YouTube channel and conferences, so you can watch it if you're interested in. Why I'm mentioning this? Because I took a look at the winner applications, and especially at the source code. And if you read, the description of the projects, there are actually more or less complex or powerful applications. But if you look at the code, it is really that simple, which I really appreciate. There was no over-engineering. Code was to the point. Sometimes, of course, it could be improved, but it was still amazing code. So there were like 3 layers or something, which just often there's just a REST, JAX REST resource, and this basically was. So if you're interested, take a look at the projects. There was a Slurpanize, WebLith. This was migration from this is an interesting migration case study, where WebLith was migrated from an old legacy system to a new world. Slurpanize is like, food trucks, scheduling, a food truck entire solution from. Then we have the population health, and there was another one. This was like, and I didn't review this Bright Act because it didn't make to the finalists, I think. Let's see, submitted type. So I had modernized, serverless, Kubernetes, and IoT. This is what I reviewed. And sort recent. And there was one project, I think it was the project with the health, where they even use the serverless option for actually. There was a nice use case for serverless, where they use the serverless functions to extract data from the cloud, so like message-driven beans. So there was a perfect case for serverless. So if you have some time, take a look at the winners or all projects. And we have the job runner was also here somewhere, I found. So we already discussed job runner. job runner in EHXDV already. Okay, so next one. I think we covered, all the stuff. So what we could do is we have two last questions, 13 and 14, which were overflow from EHX77. So we have to think about that. So I will just open this in a new tab. Okay, so now this is covered. And now proceed with the first real question. So Makumsi 1, as you can see, a JBoss guy, asked me, there's an architectural framework from Accenture about which was built for Spring, and this is architectural framework, and the question is, do we have something comparable in Java E? So I think I have no idea about the framework, but if you take a look, let's say on the white paper, so I would like to open that. So it looks professional and nice, but it is from 2015. And I tried to look at the framework because the name of the framework is, I found it somewhere, ASPJ or something like this, AFPJ. So if you search for this, there will be no references. And it seems not to be an open source framework. I couldn't find it, for instance, on GitHub. And I think you have absolutely no chance if you would try to do this right now. And what I don't believe in Jakarta and microprofile space, I don't believe in frameworks. What I think is better to have a set of simple, small, and helpful best practices. This is actually what we do, the last 6 years at EHXDV. And what I do in larger projects, we have common conventions, how to name a top-level package. So we boundary control entity or something like this. Or, how to deal with transactions, where to open transactions. And I think for this purpose, it is easier to create a Hello World, or because Hello World is not that easy. The problem I always have with sample applications is if you take names from the target domain, let's say we would build a template for a hospital with patients or whatever, then probably it would be a wrong assumption, like it will assume this is like best domain practice. So the developers would name everything patient or whatever, which usually is not true. So, and if you name it trivially, like, this is like message hello world, goodbye or whatever, then it seems too trivial and you won't find a good names for the packages. So this is actually the challenge. And this is actually the reason why most of the frameworks I know are like, bureaucratic design frameworks or, technically structured, because they only comprise, of folder-like facades, exceptions, enums, DTOs, and you could build with the same framework whatever you like without thinking about business logic. So I think the time of architectural frameworks in Jakarta and microprofile space is over. Okay, so now I think we covered that. So right now, actually recently, I performed a code review for a huge system, and they used a framework, and my advice was to remove it. Just simplify everything and remove the framework. So, what is merits and demerits of commercial architecture framework like Accenture Foundation platform for Java? I don't know the framework. I couldn't find the code. Maybe it is a genius framework, but if this is not available, it will be never accepted. So this is the huge problem of the framework is no one. For me, it's not easy, to get the source code and to evaluate the framework, and I couldn't find any publications, any conference talks or whatever. So that's the problem. Now the next one, Alip TTB asked me, and he has multiple questions. So I see you use Mac for your work. Yes. And you already know the story. I had a Windows machine ThinkPad. I really liked the ThinkPad, but the motherboard broke. I couldn't get a replacement, and then thought what to do. I had already Linux on my server, so okay, then I would try something new and bought a Mac. And since then I use Mac. The killer feature of a Mac is the time machine for backups. Okay, now this was a summary of my professional development, you know. This was my bio basically. So now, how do I set a development environment for Mac? And what I actually did, and this is the part of the microprofile or apps with microprofile workshop, but there's one video. This is the video. Visual Studio Code setup. So this is the setup how to start with Visual Studio Code on Mac from scratch. So if you like, watch this. And I think there's not a lot to do. So what I tend to do is I'm able to switch quickly between JDKs. So for instance, J11. So this is now I'm on Java 11 and J14. Then I should be on 14. And I'm not sure whether there's J8. Oh, I still have J8. Wow, I still Java 8. I didn't knew that. So I have Java 8, Java 11, Java 14. So what's the magic behind? This is an alias, hopefully. Yeah, it is. It looks like this. And on Mac, you have, you know, this Java home minus V11 and minus V14 and 8. And you can switch, you know, between the JDKs really fast. So this is one of the tricks. So I install OpenJDK, different versions. I install Docker, Visual Studio Code, NetBeans, IntelliJ on demand. So I maintain the JetBrains. I have the JetBrains toolbox license. So sometimes I use IntelliJ for fun because I like the look and feel. And now mainly I use Visual Studio Code because it's new and I like to play with it. And for me, it is a nice, you know, it's something new. So now we have a nice distraction. This is what I wanted to say. Okay, now I think that's all. So I don't know what you expect, but I use Z Shell. It ships already with the newest Macs. Before that, I use Oh My Z Shell. That's the name, Oh My Z Shell. Let's see whether Oh My Z Shell. And I'm not. I used it for years. I have no idea whether it is still, but this is a fairly popular, and it comes with predefined Z Shell, and Z Shell is just. I actually forgot, you know, the advantages over Bash. I use it all the time, even on my Linux box. So Z Shell, Java, Visual Studio Code, Docker, and I think you are good to go. And anything else? And if the colors, I think they come from Solarized, and then your machine will look exactly like mine. And Solarized is a nice color scheme, which I like. But I think I use it already for more than 8 to 10 years, I would say. Okay, cool. Now, I do a lot of GSF development. I always use prime faces, and he has some problems with Pi input number. And how does this work? So, and he says it doesn't work on Mac, but it does on PCs. So it is hard to tell what it is. So if you search, for instance, Adam Bean CentOS encoding, you will find what happened on my Docker image. So I use CentOS, and if you update libc, it will reset the encoding. And what happened then, you know, if someone registered to my AHEX Live or AHEX.com workshop from Europe, but we know it's the strange German or Swedish or whatever characters, then we couldn't read that. And I thought the problem is the browser. Then I thought the problem is the application server. But the real problem was the operating system and the glibc update. So I described it there, and the post is somehow fairly popular. So it seems a lot of people have the same problem. So this could be, if you develop in Docker, check out, you know, the backend. Okay. So I think we covered that. Next one. So JPA versus JDBC, when to use each one. So I think this is simple. Start with JPA or Panache in Quarkus is you are faster. And in case you know, you need some special treatment, then just switch to JDBC. And he asked me, okay, if you cannot map, the entity to the table, what to do? Creating views and mapping them as entities. This is actually a great advice, and this is actually preferred in larger companies. So sometimes we only had to talk to our tables via views. This was like the idea of the architect. So this usually works. Native queries on top of entities, named native queries. This is what I will advise you. So there is no SQL injection. Plain and simple JDBC. So I don't think, JDBC is not that simple, or simple. You have to write lots of code. So, but if you like JDBC and you're happy with JDBC, go for it. So nothing against JDBC. It is even less than JPA, because you have the complete control. So and then okay, I think I covered all of your problems here. So, and how does plain SQL affect JPA cached entities? This is a good one. So what will happen is, if you have in the same transaction a JPA and a JDBC statement, then what can happen is that the JDBC will overwrite the database and you won't see your own data. So to prevent that, you will have to flush the entity manager, so you can change an entity, flush the entity manager, it will send the data back to the database, and you can use JDBC to rewrite the data from a database. So this is what can happen, and it already happened in projects. So, a friend of the show and a friend of airhacks.com, Daniel, I think his name, of course, Daniel Vamara asked me, I have a question regarding metrics of an application. And he was gathering metrics from the business methods and how to pass metrics from service to service. And by the way, what I did is what you are requesting here, I actually did in my recent microprofile training workshop. So what it means is the following. So if we just open that. This is the microprofile training, and it comprises two microservices. One is called content, and the other one is called reactor. So content and reactor. And the content provides you just like the content repository, like the database, and the reactor renders the posts. This is the main idea. And the problem I had is, of course, what I would like to have is metrics from both environments. And what happens automatically is with OpenTracing, microprofile OpenTracing, you get all the calls traced. So what you will see is the delay and the latency between microservice calls. So it means if the reactor calls, and there's this main Java. So let's open this fully. Not airhacks, rather than blockpad posts, and I think is control. So the post resource client. So and this client response find post communicates actually with the content. As you can see, register client headers. I created my wildcard client headers factory, which just prints out all the headers. Why is this needed? So I was just curious because the JSON Web Token is also sent between the microservices. But what happens here? The spans are traced between the first microservice and the reactor and the content. And if you take a look at the resource, so you will see that this traced. This is all you need. With the traced, all the microservice resources are with the traced, the traces, the spans are stored in a central location on Jaeger in my case. So this example ships with Docker Compose and Jaeger, and this is the Jaeger, and both services are sending the data to Jaeger, and you will see it live during the workshop. And because I'm mentioning the workshop a lot, what I did is the following. So with the AHEXTV code, you get 20% off for the apps with microprofile workshop. So so at least something. And also, you don't have to buy the workshop at all. So I would just wait a second. If we switch to microprofile training and go to the GitHub repository, you get, of course, the entire code for free. And this is the name, this is the microprofile training, and this is the blog path. This is exactly the same application I have locally. So you can just clone it and try it out and look at the code. So, okay. Now, that's all. As you can see here, I have here some fallback on concurrent and bulkheads and concurrent gauge. And what's also interesting here, the microprofile fault tolerance annotations, they also contribute to the metrics. So with these annotations, you will have additional metrics, which you will see, how often this method was too slow and this method was invoked instead, for instance. And what I prefer in my project, I use, as you said, counters, or as you wrote, counters, just to count, what happens with the business objects in my projects. How many, malformed posts were stored in the database, and how many posts are good and what or are valid. And if I actually forgot, you have actually two versions of the project. One was for the workshop and the other one is a little bit more evolved, but I think, let's see. So we have the registry here, and I would just, you see here, we have, so for instance, in this example, what I'm doing here, I have how many posts were created and how many posts were fetched with not existing title. So what it means is someone tries to fetch from server an URI for a not existing post. So a matrix is generated because this is interesting, and you cannot just create such a matrix by annotate a method. So this, increase hit counter. So this increase a counter how often a post is fetched how often a post is fetched, and here how often fetching fails because the URI doesn't exist. So this is an example of I would say valuable metrics. Okay, so I hope we have it now. So, and what you will see in Jaeger, you will see, the first microservice, then the second microservice, and a sequence-like diagram. So this is how it looks like. So the next one, and this is the code review of a project Jaretto, which looks interesting, but the use case is very, very unique. So what Jaretto is, it is a open source framework of a company I think I know from previous projects. It's in Austria. And it is a Jakarta E8 and microprofile client, a little bit outdated, and I wondered why. And because they have to use JBoss EAP 7.3, because I think they have to run supported software. And so this Jaretto. And here, I took a look at the code, what it actually is. And it looks somehow nice, but what it actually does is something what I don't do. And I also didn't in my microprofile training project. So what they do is they serialize and deserialize automatically exceptions, for instance. And I have a complete different approach. So what they can do is, you can declare an exception on the backend, and this exception is automatically serialized and sent to the client. And in the client, you have microprofile REST client with this exception. So what it means is it is a little bit remote procedure call, and it of course only makes sense in case the client is Java client. If it isn't, it doesn't make any sense because there is no point, to have Java exceptions in JavaScript, right? So if you this is interesting library, it's cleanly written. I found some problems. So first, what I do instead of serializing, deserializing exceptions, I do this. There is a storage exception. If you take a look at the exception, let's see whether we will find that. No, yeah, we will find that storage exception, and it extends web application exception, and then it serializes itself. And in this particular case, in arrow 500, and then you get additional calls in the headers. This is what I usually tend to do, and this is easy, you know, to get on the JavaScript side. So this is what happens here. So and this project Jaretto has a few problems with thread local. So I took a look. This thread local is never cleaned up, and so it has memo leaks actually. So I took a look at the code. And what I would do instead of using thread local, if you would like to use the library, I would use a request scoped injection because it's the same. So instead of using thread local, just use request scoped. So then it would work better. Okay, so useful library if you would like to have more Java feel to REST. So this is the added value. Nice. Next one. So, and Daniel already had some conversations. And now, friend of the show and friend of AIX.com, Shagai asked me, okay, what's about document storage? And I think what he asked is not like document database like JSON, so to be Elasticsearch or Postgres, rather than documents like, you know, Words or PDFs. This is my understanding. And I don't think there is a nice open source solution out of the box. There probably is, but it's not like, you know, widely spread and known. But if you mean this is an e-document management system, so I think what he means is a true documents. And or documents are files, right? So Word files. So what I will do is I will take a look at Elasticsearch or Postgres, because Postgres is way beyond. It also can be used for indexing. So if you search for Postgres index, you will find index documents, full text search. So it comes with really powerful full text search, and this is what you need for powerful searching for documents. So, but the question is how to convert, you know, Word into something which Postgres or Elastic can understand. And for this particular thing, there's Apache Tika. It's a great framework, and the whole point of Tika is to dissect known formats like PowerPoint, XSL, or PDF, so convert them into something readable by databases. So I think in your case, Shy Guy, I would take a look at Apache Tika and combine this with Postgres or Elastic. So I would probably go with Postgres because it's a little bit more popular than Elastic, and there's and if you're thinking about JSON documents, I would probably tend to use more Elastic than Postgres. But I think you mean PDFs or Words. Okay, covered. So DHPI asked me, how can I test defined RolesAllowed on REST resources using a predefined JASPIC login module? So JASPIC module login module is something which works behind the Java 8 security. So you can use the Java 8 security to access JASPIC or directly. So if you have Quarkus, so then you can just inject whatever you like in a test. So it works out of the box. There's no additional Archillion-like framework needed. So it likes Quarkus ships with built-in Archillion. So if you have Payara, Whitefly, or whatever, so what we do then is we configure the server differently. So instead of using the production JASPIC module, we use our JASPIC modules. In one particular case, we were able, to replace the realm with file store. So on a new machine, you would use text files as a storage for users, and in production, you will use whatever in production is used. And I do a similar approach with JSON Web Tokens right now. So if you take a look at Jotanizer, hopefully. Yes. This is the Jotanizer command line utility. I wrote it exactly for this purpose, not for JustPeek, rather than for JSON Web Token authentication. And what I do is I create my own JSON Web Token and override the public key with a microprofile config. So I can say now I'm the master, and then I can say for this test I'm a guest or admin. If you would like to see it in action, there's a YouTube video. So what it means to you is if you have nothing locally. Wait a second. Where's so covered, also covered, and covered as well. So what it means is if you have Docker, create another Docker image with Wildflower Payara configured with your fake JustPeek module, or not with JustPeek at all. Just for instance, Payara can use JDBC or whatever you have. So then you don't have to use JustPeek module for tests, because you're not testing JustPeek. You would like to be admin or whatever, so you can just get rid of JustPeek altogether and use your own authentication mechanism. Yeah, which will provide roles and groups. And I even wrote an old Java magazine article about that for Payara, where I use JDBC store, so 2 tables, and then you can do whatever like. So if you're running locally, even easier, then you can just use the AS admin utility to configure Payara to read from whatever you like. So this is not a big deal at all. Okay, so now this is still the discussion with Jareto, and now DHPI asked me about, this is a very similar question. So there is a web XML, and sometimes you would like to have SSL and sometimes not. And I have similar situation for WebSockets testing, so I needed SSL. And what I did, I created my own certificate with Let's Encrypt. So maybe this would be the easiest possibility for you, so you can always use the same configuration. And if not, then unfortunately you will have to modify the web XML, right? Because what you would like to do is to change the session configuration, and you could make it configurable, the web XML, in theory. There's an API in Java EE to make it configurable, but I never tried that. So before I will fiddle with the application server, I would change the web XML. How you can do it with Maven filters? It's not exactly cloud native, because you will change the web XML. But I hope that in test, integration, and production stage, you get the same, SSL delivery already, and you just deactivate SSL on your local machine, which you could do. And JNDI, no, I don't think there's no relation to JNDI, because you cannot just, JNDI has nothing to do with cookies. Okay. Now, Payara Grizzly does not allow / in a URL, and Payara is right. So why that? Because if we create a new file, and let's try to create a /. So we have the /. So what I could do, encode and decode, if I convert that to so / has to be and %5c. So this is what URL encoder in Java does, and maybe you could do something in the filter, but it's not right. So what you should do is you should encode the / into %5c. So this would be a better way. And I had similar issues if you watch my apps with microprofile online training. I had my URIs for my post have to be properly encoded, otherwise you get strange errors. So yeah, you have to encode the URLs correctly. Florin Alexandriou asked me, what about, it's also a similar question, he would like to produce a Postgres data source, and in integration tests, I think system tests, he would like to change the data source to point to test of my database. And this would be the perfect case for Archelion, because what you could do is you could actually in Archelion tell Archelion, fetch from a source test Java and something which specializes whatever like. So you could specialize this Postgres data source producer into a test Postgres data source producer, which doesn't expose the data source, this one, but another one or a mock one. And this is the easiest way to do. So I already wrote articles about that. There is this Java testing course. And by the way, what I did, I separated, this is on the weekend, the online workshops, these Java and web. So now they are separated because people also complain, you know, what is Java and what not. Now it's more clearly. And what I'm talking about is Java 7 testing, because the name is 7, but it's still up to date. And what I did there is I did exactly this. So I use Archillion to override a default where Archillion shines. It's one of the killer use cases where you could use Archillion or Delta Spike for testing. Thank you, Florin. So, but what I will do in the integration tests, first, I see only a little value of that, because if you just inject that directly and without the private, I mean, it is for me good enough. And what you can also, if this is no private, then in unit tests, you could just mock the data source and do whatever you like. In integration tests, the question is, what do you like to test? Would you like to test, you know, the production of that? Should work, otherwise the server will be broken. Or would you like to test your queries? So yeah, but Archillion would solve the problem, and Quarkus as well. So question, it seems like there are the connections can get broken on Whitefly, and the question is, you know, how to deal with that. And so if you take a look at the documentation of Whitefly connection pools, so this is common data source parameters, you can even have a valid connection checker class name. You can create your own class which checks the collections. You can connections, not collections. You can have an valid connection SQL statement where you can say, before I use the connection, it should be rechecked, and if it is not valid, it will be reopened. And you say, okay, if I see this SQL, I would like to have a new connection. So I would say it's pretty powerful. So it already comes out of the box with this functionality. So you can check whether the connections are valid or not, and they get automatically reopened. Yeah, and you can even have a background validations, or you can say the connections should be only valid for a few minutes and then reopen. So this is actually what you search for, and this is available for ages. Now, next one, DHPI asked me, Ambient and concurrency, what to do. Stateless would do this, but it's overkill. So what he would like to say, there's ambient is a singleton, everyone accesses the ambient via JMX, and there is a concurrent hash map behind, and then a hash map behind or some state, and the problem is of course concurrency, how to deal with that. So what you could do, you could use not only EJBs, you could use request scope, because what request scope does is it opens a new request per call. The problem, of course, is there is no request, I guess, in your ambient. I have no idea how the ambient gets accessed from where. And so what you will need is something like, you know, a scope per thread. And if you have concurrent hash map, it will work. So at least the hash map doesn't get, you know, corrupt. But you have to be careful what happens if you access, you know, the items in the hash map concurrently. So, but calculation is not a problem. So if you have a calculations, but the results have to be stored back concurrently to the same slot, then you have a problem. So you have typical concurrency problem. EJBs could solve that. Request scope could solve that. The problem is, of course, how to open requests, which there is a tag actually in CDI. So yeah. The problem you have is exactly like you have a singleton with a map. How to deal with that? So of course you could synchronize the singleton, but there is no concurrency. And if there is, and if you disable the synchronization, then you have to deal with concurrency and concurrent hash maps, right? So there is no solution to that. So friend of the show and podcast. So he also we had fun with. I forgot his name because I see the Deratzman, but in a second we can just, you know, backtrack this guy. Deratzman here. Bastian Sperhake, this is his name, and he is responsible to push 500 kilobyte thin wars to AWS with Payara, and yeah, that's the idea here. So, and he created lots of annotations now because he's replacing EJBs in Quarkus project with CDI. For replacing stateless, I would do something like this. Asynchronous, not necessarily, because not all EJBs are asynchronous. Bulkhead, yes, it could, because Bulkhead, what you get with that is you can, prevent too many threads at the same time. Request scope, yes. Transactional, yes. Stereotype, yes. Yeah, this looks good. Then, and Singleton, Bulkhead. Okay, Singleton, I would go with application scoped because Singleton is lesser known. Transactional, maybe. Stereotype, yeah, stereotype retention. Okay, so I'm not sure about the asynchronous, and I'm not sure about, wait a second, no, just about the asynchronous. So the bin pooling is a problem. I don't see a way, to have a bin pooling, and if you take a look at the apps with microprofile, what I used there is I use GraalVM and JavaScript, and it takes some time, to establish the environment. And EJBs would be great at stateless, but I say, okay, in this particular course, I won't use EJBs on purpose. But it's not that easy with request scope, because for request scope, it will open and close the JavaScript environment on every call, on each call. So which is problematic. So single running process at one time. Singleton. So Singleton is that if you would like to reuse the existing beans, I will probably implement that with my block pad. So I have to think about this. But right now there's nothing out of the box. Bulkhead is similar to EJBs, you are right, but the instances are not reused. So to have a very similar thing, you would need an application scope bean and implement, the queuing or reusing by yourself, which I would not do. So my advice would be to go with request scoped without pooling and hope it is fast enough. And on Quarkus, it should be fast enough. Okay, nice, thank you. I think we are not done, because what I forgot is 2 overflow questions from last time. So, and this one is interesting. So what he would like to achieve is the following. He would like to persist and write to Kafka in a single transaction. The problem is, for instance, the entity persist, Quarkus panache or JPA, doesn't matter. And Kafka publish, Kafka is also a database actually. So you will need, one transaction for both, which is not possible. So I think the most Kafkanese way would be to write to Kafka first, because then, Kafka is with Kafka, it captures, the single truth. This is how Kafka should be used. Write to a Kafka first to the queue, and then the message is not lost. And then you can process the message with another listener, read from this, how it's called in Kafka, topic, from this topic, and write to another topic, which then persists with Quarkus panache. Because it seems like in this particular case, you are misusing Kafka as a GMS tool, and that's the problem. So, and maybe JPA not catch any eventual errors in database. So what you could do, of course, what you could do is you could wait until the database commits. You could use CDI events for that, for instance, right? Let's see, CDI transactional. So this is exactly what we need. So we have transaction listener, as you can see, is in progress on success on a failure. So these methods are going to be invoked in the transaction phase, And this is what you need. What you can also do is you can just persist to the EJB, and then you know whether the transaction is going to commit or not. And if it commits, you can write to Kafka. This would be another possibility. And this is 7 years old blog post. So I almost forgot about that. So it means we have on success and on failure. So there is an after success, so you know that the transaction committed, and there is before completion, so you know then that the transaction is going to commit. So it is going to commit, but is not committed yet. So this is the classic transaction phases. And what you will have to do is, so in your particular case, what you will need to do is, after persisting, you send the event, and you write to Kafka in such a listener. This is what I would do. And there are no non-reliable message to topic. In Kafka, everything is reliable. So non-reliable topics in Kafka is not possible. Or I mean, it could be possible, but it's strange. It's like, you know, having a database without transactions. I mean, we already had that, but it's unusual, right? And next one. So monitor JTA transaction with microprofile is not possible because microprofile doesn't know about transactions per se. It comes with CDI, and CDI allows to use the transactional annotation, which actually comes with the JTA spec. But most of the application servers are exposing microprofile statistics. So there are lots of exceptions. The question is how to deal with that. And you already saw the code in the here. No, not here. In the microprofile training workshop. Let's wait a second. Where was it? Just reopen that. Okay, this was the storage exception. This is how I deal with exceptions. So I have business exceptions, and some of the exceptions throw different kind of exceptions. And you can do exactly the same what we did 5 years ago. So we can have an app business exception and system exception, but both are runtime. So both inherit from web application exception, but the business exception would throw bad request 400, and the runtime exception would usually only throw 500s. Perfect. So now we covered not only all questions from now, but also from 77th AHEXTV from August. So I think we are done. Let's see. Thank you, Brett. And yeah, Lucene, Ali suggests Lucene, but Elasticsearch uses Lucene behind the scenes. And the thinking was about showing the metrics on Grafana via Prometheus. This works out of the box. So if you have Prometheus, you can use Grafana as a, you can use Prometheus as a data source for Grafana. So this just works, nothing else to do. Okay, I think we are done. So see you next time in autumn. So even later in the autumn, and then almost in winter. So thank you a lot, and see you at upcoming. There's the one thing which I forgot to mention. There is the AirHacks Live around the corner in September, and they are architecting and designing Java microprofile in Jakarta. Very first time I do something like this online, but this will be never recorded. This is going to be a virtual live event. So if you like, join. And yeah, see you at the 79th AHEXTV in October. So thank you and bye.